The cold wind howled across the moon's surface as Dr. Thomas Reed adjusted his helmet's oxygen flow. His boots left deep prints in the gray dust as he walked toward the ancient stone structure that had caught his attention 3 days ago. The year was 2457, and humanity had spread across hundreds of star systems, but this discovery felt different from anything he had seen before. "Base, this is Reed. I'm approaching the entrance now," he said into his radio. The crackle of static replied before a clear voice came through. "Copy that, Doctor. Remember, you have 4 hours of oxygen left," the base operator responded. Reed smiled to himself. After 20 years of studying alien ruins, he had never forgotten to check his oxygen levels. But this time, his mind was racing with excitement. The stone structure wasn't like the usual metal and crystal buildings left behind by known alien species. This one was different. It seemed to pulse with a faint blue light that his instruments couldn't explain. The war with the Coalition had been going on for 15 years now. Earth and its colonies fought against 5 alien species who had joined forces to push humanity back to their home system. Reed had lost his brother in the Battle of Proxima, and his sister served on the front lines. Yet here he was, looking for answers in the dust of a forgotten moon. As he approached the entrance, his hand scanner began to beep rapidly. "That's strange," he muttered, tapping the device. The reading showed energy patterns he had never seen before. The entrance was a perfect circle, about 3 meters wide, with symbols carved around its edge that seemed to shift and change as he looked at them. Reed took a deep breath and stepped inside. His helmet lights automatically activated, revealing a long corridor that sloped gently downward. The walls were covered in more of the shifting symbols, and that strange blue glow seemed stronger here. "Base, I'm heading in. The structure appears to be some kind of temple or archive. The construction method is unlike anything in our records," he reported, carefully making his way down the corridor. The passage opened into a vast circular chamber. Reed's jaw dropped as his lights revealed what waited inside. In the center of the room stood a hologram, perfectly preserved after what must have been thousands of years. It showed a galaxy-spanning war, fleets of ships he didn't recognize, and then something that made his heart skip a beat. A weapon, or at least that's what the symbols called it. But it wasn't like any weapon he had ever seen. The hologram showed it bringing peace, not through destruction, but through some kind of connection between different species. "Base, you need to see this," Reed said, his voice trembling with excitement. He activated his helmet's camera. "I'm looking at what appears to be a historical record. These beings, whoever they were, they created something. Something that ended a war even bigger than ours." As he studied the symbols more closely, Reed's translator began to decipher some of the text. Words appeared on his helmet display. "To those who seek power, know that the greatest force lies not in destruction, but in understanding. Our gift is scattered among the stars, waiting for those wise enough to use it." Reed's hands shook as he recorded everything. This wasn't just another alien ruin. This was a map, a guide to something that could change everything. The symbol showed 7 worlds, each holding a piece of this mysterious creation. "Base, get me a secure line to Earth Command," he said, still staring at the hologram. "And contact Professor Wells at the Military History Department. Tell her," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "tell her I found what we've been looking for, a way to end this war." As Reed began documenting the chamber's contents, he couldn't help but smile. After all these years of searching through alien ruins, he had finally found something that could make a difference. The only question was, would humanity be wise enough to use it? Professor Anna Wells stared at the hologram recordings for the 10th time that day. Dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept much since arriving at the moon base 3 days ago. The coffee cup next to her had gone cold, forgotten in her deep concentration. "Play it again," she said to no one in particular. The hologram flickered to life, showing the same scenes of ancient warfare and peace that had captivated Dr. Reed last week. Reed walked into the research lab, carrying fresh coffee. "I thought you might need this," he said, placing the new cup beside her old one. "Any progress?" "These symbols," Wells pointed at the screen. "They're like nothing I've seen in my 15 years of studying alien languages, but there's something familiar about them." She took a sip of the fresh coffee and smiled gratefully. The lab was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional beep from the translation software. Earth Command had given them full access to the most advanced equipment available, knowing that this discovery could change the course of the war. "Look here," Wells said suddenly, pointing at a sequence of symbols. "These patterns keep repeating, but they change slightly each time. It's not just a language. It's a code within a language." Reed pulled up a chair next to her. "What kind of code?" "The beings who built this place, the builders as we're calling them. They didn't just write these symbols. They engineered them to respond to conscious thought." Wells typed quickly on her keyboard, and new patterns appeared on the screen. Each symbol carries multiple layers of meaning, like a compressed file waiting to be opened. As if responding to her words, the symbols on the screen began to shift and change. Reed leaned forward, his eyes wide. "I've seen them do that before, but never like this." Wells pressed her hand against the screen, and suddenly the symbols rearranged themselves into clear, readable text. "It's not a weapon," she whispered. "At least, not in the way we think of weapons." The translation revealed itself line by line. "To bridge the gap between minds, to share the pain and joy of all beings, to know the enemy as oneself. This is the gift we leave behind. 7 parts, 7 worlds, 1 truth." "Neural technology," Reed said softly. "They built something that could connect different species mentally." Wells nodded, her excitement growing. "Not just connect them. This technology would allow complete sharing of thoughts, memories, and emotions across species. The builders believed that no one could continue fighting once they truly understood their enemy." Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent message from Earth Command, appearing on the main screen. "Professor Wells, Dr. Reed, your discovery has been leaked. Coalition forces are mobilizing. Multiple fleets are changing course toward known builder sites." Reed cursed under his breath. "How did they find out?" "It doesn't matter now," Wells said, already saving their data to secure drives. "What matters is that we understand what we're really looking for. This isn't about finding a superweapon. It's about finding a way to bridge the gap between species." The base's alarm system suddenly blared to life. Red lights flashed as the base commander's voice came over the speakers. "All personnel, this is not a drill. Coalition scout ships have been detected entering the system. Prepare for immediate evacuation." Wells quickly gathered their research materials while Reed contacted the transport bay. As they rushed through the base's corridors, Wells turned to Reed. "The builders were right, you know. The greatest wars aren't won with weapons. They're won with understanding. Let's just hope we can find all the pieces before the coalition does," Reed replied as they reached the evacuation ship. "Because if this technology does what we think it does, forcing it on people would be just as bad as any weapon." As their ship lifted off from the moon's surface, Wells looked back at the ancient structure growing smaller below them. Somewhere among the stars, 6 more pieces of the puzzle waited to be found. The race to find them had begun, but now she understood. The real challenge wouldn't be finding the pieces, but choosing how to use them. Captain Mark Stone stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the stars streak past through the main viewport. His ship, one of Earth's newest research vessels, had been specially modified for this mission. Extra armor plating covered its hull, and hidden weapon systems lay beneath its civilian appearance. "Status report," he called out to his crew. "Coalition fleet detected in the Centauri sector," replied his sensor officer. 3 warships, probably looking for the same thing we are." Stone nodded, his expression grim. The Prometheus had been running for 2 weeks straight, staying just ahead of coalition forces. In the cargo bay below, Dr. Reed and Professor Wells worked tirelessly to decode more of the builder's messages about the scattered components. The ship's intercom crackled. "Captain, you need to see this." Wells' voice came through clearly excited. "We've found the location of the first piece." Minutes later, Stone stood in the research lab, looking at a holographic map of nearby star systems. A red dot pulsed steadily on one of the outer planets. "It's there." Reed pointed to the frozen world. "The first component is hidden in some kind of underground facility. The builder's maps are very specific about this location." "That's deep in Coalition space," Stone said, studying the map. "Getting there won't be easy." "We don't have a choice," Wells replied, pulling up more data on her screen. "The component has to be collected in a specific order. This one comes first." A warning alarm suddenly blared through the ship. "Captain, to the bridge." His first officer's voice was urgent. Back on the bridge, Stone found his crew in full alert. A massive ship had just appeared on their scanners, unlike anything they'd seen before. Its hull was black as space itself, making it almost invisible to the naked eye. "Coalition flagship detected," the sensor officer reported. "Sir, it's the Night Hunter. Commander First Light's personal vessel." Stone had heard stories about First Light and his ship. The commander had earned his reputation by being both brilliant and merciless in pursuit of his goals. If he was here personally, the situation was more serious than they'd thought. "Message coming in," the communications officer announced. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." First Light's voice filled the bridge, smooth and cold. "Human vessel, this is Commander First Light of the Coalition forces. We know what you seek. The Builder's gift is not meant for your kind alone. Surrender your research, and you may leave with your lives." Stone looked at Reed and Wells, who had just arrived on the bridge. Wells shook her head firmly. They couldn't give up now. "Plot a course through the asteroid field," Stone ordered his navigator. "We'll lose them in there." "Sir, the asteroids are highly unstable," his navigator protested. "One wrong move and—" "That's exactly why they won't follow us." Stone smiled. "Sometimes the most dangerous path is the safest." The Prometheus turned sharply, diving into the dense field of tumbling rocks. Behind them, the Night Hunter grew larger on their screens as it gave chase. "They're charging weapons," the sensor officer reported. "Hold course," Stone commanded. "Professor Wells, Dr. Reed, I suggest you both strap in. This might get rough." The ship weaved through the asteroid field, rocks the size of buildings tumbling past their viewport. Stone's hands gripped his captain's chair as the ship shuddered from near misses. A massive explosion lit up space behind them. The Night Hunter had hit one of the larger asteroids, forcing it to fall back. "We're clear," the navigator shouted as they burst out of the asteroid field. "Course laid in for the frozen world, sir." Stone allowed himself a small smile. "Good work, everyone. But don't celebrate yet. This was just the beginning." Reed looked at the star map again, where the frozen world waited. "Captain," he said quietly, "what we find there, it could change everything." "Let's hope we get there first," Stone replied, watching the stars ahead. "Because I have a feeling Commander First Light isn't done with us yet." The Prometheus jumped to light speed, leaving the asteroid field and the Coalition ships behind. The race for the first component had truly begun, and none of them knew exactly what they would find on that frozen world. But they all knew one thing. They had to get there first. The frozen world's winds howled around them as Reed, Wells, and Stone made their way across the ice-covered surface. Their heated suits kept them warm against the -200°C temperature, but the harsh environment still made every step difficult. "The entrance should be just ahead," Reed said, checking his scanner. The device was picking up the same strange energy signature they had found in the first ruins, about 50 meters north. Stone kept his hand close to his weapon, scanning the white landscape for any sign of Coalition forces. The Prometheus waited in orbit above, hidden behind the planet's largest moon. They had arrived just hours ahead of First Light's ship, but they knew that wouldn't last long. There, Wells pointed to a dark shape emerging from the swirling snow. As they got closer, They saw it was another circular doorway, just like the one on the moon, with the same shifting symbols around its edge. "No time for careful study," Stone said, checking his oxygen gauge. "We have 30 minutes of air left, and the coalition could show up any minute." They entered the structure, their helmet lights cutting through the darkness. Unlike the moon ruins, this place hummed with power. Blue lines of energy pulsed through the walls, growing brighter as they walked deeper inside. "It's still active," Reed whispered in awe. "After all these thousands of years, it's still running." The passage opened into a chamber smaller than the one they had found before. In its center floated a crystal sphere about the size of a human hand, suspended in a beam of blue light. Wells approached it carefully, her scanner working to decode the symbols that covered the walls. "This is it, the first component. The translations say it's a neural interface of some kind." "How do we get it out?" Stone asked, watching their time tick away. Reed studied the pedestal beneath the floating crystal. "I think we just..." He reached out and touched a symbol. The blue beam disappeared, and the crystal dropped gently into his waiting hands. The moment Reed touched the crystal, it lit up from within. Images flooded into their minds, not just pictures, but feelings, memories, thoughts that weren't their own. Stone gasped as he felt the weight of centuries press against his consciousness. What is this?" "It's showing us," Wells said, her voice filled with wonder. "This is what the weapon does. It's not a weapon at all. It's a bridge." Through the crystal's power, they experienced fragments of alien lives. They felt the joy of a coalition child's first flight, the pride of a human farmer watching their crops grow, the fear of a soldier on both sides of the war, the love of families separated by the conflict. "Now we know why they called it a weapon to end all wars," Reed said softly. "How can you fight someone when you've felt what they feel? When you've lived their lives?" Their shared vision was interrupted by an alarm from Stone's suit computer. "Coalition ships entering the atmosphere," he reported. "We need to move." They carefully packed the crystal into a shielded container, but its effects had already changed them. As they rushed back through the tunnels, each of them knew they would never see the war the same way again. They reached the surface just as the first coalition ships appeared in the sky. Snow swirled around them as they ran for their hidden shuttle. "Base, we need immediate pickup," Stone called into his radio. "Package is secured." As their shuttle lifted off, they saw Commander First Light's forces landing near the ruins. But instead of firing on them, the coalition ships held their position. "They're not attacking," Stone said, surprised. Wells looked at the container holding the crystal. Maybe they felt it too. Maybe that's the point. The shuttle docked with the Prometheus, and they quickly jumped to light speed. In the ship's lab, they studied the crystal more carefully. Its glow had dimmed, but the understanding it had given them remained. 6 more pieces to find," Reed said, making notes about their experience. "And now we know why the builders scattered them. This kind of power, this level of connection, people have to choose it. They have to be ready for it." Stone nodded, still processing what he had felt through the crystal. "The question is, are we ready? Is anyone?" "We don't have to be ready yet," Wells replied, studying the map to their next destination. "But we better figure it out soon. Because this is just the beginning of what the builders left behind." 2 months had passed since finding the first component. The Prometheus's lab table now held 4 glowing crystals, each one recovered from a different world. Reed sat watching them pulse with soft blue light, his mind troubled by their latest discovery. "They're getting stronger," he said as Wells entered the lab. "The more we bring together, the more powerful the connection becomes." Wells nodded, setting down her tablet that showed maps to the remaining components. Dark circles under her eyes revealed the toll of their mission. Every crystal they found shared more memories, more emotions, more lives from both sides of the war. "The coalition is waiting for us at the next location," she said. "But this time, they're not trying to stop us. They want to talk." Stone walked into the lab, his uniform wrinkled from another long shift on the bridge. First Light's ship is approaching under a white flag. He's requesting permission to board. The three of them shared worried looks. They had all changed since finding that first crystal. The memories and feelings it shared had shown them the true cost of the war. But not everyone felt the same way. "There's something else," Stone continued. "News from Earth Command. They've seen our reports about the crystals. Some of the generals. They want to use them as a weapon. Force the entire coalition to connect. Make them feel what we feel." "That would be worse than any bomb," Wells said, shaking her head. "The builders left these in pieces for a reason. Forcing a connection that deep would destroy minds on both sides." The ship's comm system crackled. "Captain," First Light's voice came through, different from their first meeting. Softer. "We both know what these artifacts can do. My scientists have studied the crystals we found. We need to talk about what happens next." Minutes later, they sat across from First Light in the ship's conference room. The coalition commander looked tired, his usually perfect uniform showing signs of wear. The war had aged him too. "My leaders want the same thing as yours," First Light said quietly. "They want to use this technology to force an end to the war. But those of us who have touched the crystals, who have felt what they can do—" He paused, looking at each of them. "We know that would be an atrocity worse than the war itself." Reed placed one of the crystals on the table. It pulsed gently, and everyone in the room felt the slight touch of shared consciousness. "The builders didn't make these to force understanding," he said. "They made them to offer a choice. A choice that gets harder with each crystal we find." Wells added, "The network they can create, it would change everything. Not just how we fight, but how we live, how we think, how we feel." Stone leaned forward. "We have 4 components. You have 2. The last one is still out there. Whatever we decide to do, we need to decide together." First Light nodded slowly. "My people fear losing themselves in human minds. Your people fear the same about us. But I felt what these crystals can show us. There is no them. There is no us. There is only—" He struggled to find the word. "Understanding." Wells finished for him. "But forced understanding isn't understanding at all. It's just another kind of violence." The crystal on the table pulsed brighter, as if responding to their conversation. Each person in the room felt the gentle touch of shared thoughts, shared feelings, a small taste of what the completed network could offer. "We need to protect these," First Light said finally. "Not just from our leaders, but from anyone who would force this connection on others. The choice to understand, to truly know another being." He touched the crystal gently. "That choice must be free." They sat in silence, feeling the weight of their decision. The war still raged across hundreds of worlds. The temptation to force an end to it all was strong. But as they felt the crystal's soft pulse, they knew what they had to do. "Then we're agreed," Stone said, standing. "We find the last piece together. And then we make sure everyone has the choice, not the obligation, to understand." The crystal's light seemed to brighten, as if approving their decision. The path ahead would be difficult, but they had all felt the truth through the crystals. True peace couldn't be forced. It had to be chosen. The space station orbiting the dying star looked ancient and beautiful at the same time. Its spiral arms stretched out like a flower opening to the red giant below. The Prometheus and First Light's ship, the Night Hunter, approached slowly, their crews watching in awe. "The builder's last outpost," Reed said, studying the readings on his screen. "The final component has to be in there." But they weren't alone. Dozens of ships filled the space around the station. Coalition warships on one side, Earth's fleet on the other. Both sides had followed them here. "Message from Earth Command," Stone announced, his voice tight. "They're ordering us to surrender the crystals. They say it's too important to leave to chance." First Light, now standing on the Prometheus's bridge as an ally, nodded grimly. "My leaders are demanding the same thing. They won't wait much longer." Wells worked quickly at her console, the 6 crystals they had gathered glowing brightly beside her. The station's power is still on. The builders built things to last. She looked up at the others. We have to get inside before either side loses patience. Captain, the sensor officer called out suddenly. Both fleets are powering up weapons. Stone made his decision quickly. First Light, take half our security team. Wells, Reed, you're with me. We'll find the last piece while our ships buy us time. Their shuttle navigated through the tense standoff, neither fleet daring to fire first. The station's docking bay opened automatically as they approached, as if it had been waiting for them all this time. Inside, the station hummed with the same energy they had felt in all the builder ruins. Blue lines of power ran through the walls, pulsing like veins in a living thing. This way, Wells said, following the readings on her scanner. The energy signatures are strongest at the center of the station. They ran through ancient corridors, their footsteps echoing off walls that hadn't heard sound in thousands of years. Behind them, they could hear the distant rumble of ships maneuvering outside. The central chamber was enormous. A giant pillar of blue light rose from floor to ceiling, and floating in its center was a crystal different from all the others. While the others were small enough to hold, this one was the size of a person, and it pulsed with rainbow colors. The master control crystal, Reed breathed. This is what connects all the others. Wells stepped forward, reading the symbols on the walls. It's more than that. This crystal holds the builders' own memories, their knowledge, their understanding of why they built all this. An explosion rocked the station. Stone checked his communicator. Both fleets are firing warning shots. We're running out of time. First Light moved to one side of the crystal while Reed took the other. Together, they placed the 6 smaller crystals in holders that emerged from the floor. Each one lit up brighter as it connected to the master crystal. Wait, Wells said suddenly. The inscription here, it's a warning. If we activate the full network, there's no going back. Every mind that connects will be permanently changed. We'll never be able to unknow what we learn about each other. Another explosion, closer this time. The station shuddered. But it's still a choice. Stone asked, watching the crystals pulse faster. Wells nodded. The network will be there for anyone who wants to join, but it can't be forced. The builders made sure of that. First Light touched the master crystal gently. Then let those who wish to understand, understand. And let those who need time, take their time. Together, they activated the ancient machine. The crystal's light grew until it filled the chamber, reaching out through the station and into space beyond. In that moment, every being on every ship felt a gentle touch in their mind. An invitation, not a demand. Look, Reed pointed out the chamber's window. The fighting had stopped. Every ship hung motionless in space as their crews felt the first soft whisper of what understanding could mean. The light of the dying star painted everything in shades of red and gold, while the blue glow of the crystals promised something new, something that could only be discovered by choice. Stone smiled as he felt the gentle presence of the network at the edge of his thoughts. Now we wait, he said, and let everyone make their own choice about understanding. 1 month had passed since the activation of the Builders Network. The ancient space station, now permanently crewed by both humans and coalition members, had become a symbol of choice and understanding. Reed stood at the observation window, watching as another ship docked with the station. Every day, more people came. Scientists, soldiers, civilians, all choosing to experience the network for themselves. Another group from Earth, Wells said, joining him at the window. And 3 coalition families, too. She checked her tablet. That makes 5,000 people connected to the network now. Stone walked in, looking more relaxed than he had in years. The captain had been one of the first to join the network, along with First Light. Their shared experience had helped convince others that connection didn't mean losing yourself, it meant understanding more. The War Council is meeting today, Stone announced. Both sides, they're finally ready to talk about official peace terms. First Light entered the room, nodding to his former enemies who were now his closest friends. Many of the council members have experienced the network themselves now. It's harder to argue for war when you felt the cost through someone else's memories. They walked together to the station's main chamber, where the master crystal still floated in its column of light. The 6 smaller crystals pulsed in harmony around it, their glow now a familiar comfort to everyone on the station. "Remember how we thought this was a weapon?" Reed asked, touching one of the crystals gently. Through the network, the others felt his amusement at their early mistake. "In a way, it was," Wells replied. "Just not the kind we expected. It didn't destroy our enemies. It destroyed the idea of enemies itself." A soft chime announced new arrivals to the network. Through their connection, they felt the surprise and wonder of the newcomers as they experienced their first taste of shared consciousness. It was always gentle, always allowing people to choose how much they wanted to share and understand. "The builders were clever," First Light said, watching the crystal's pulse. "They knew forcing understanding would only create more conflict, but offering it as a choice." He smiled. That was the real weapon against war. Stone checked the latest reports on his tablet. The outer colonies are starting trade agreements now. 3 coalition worlds have opened their ports to human ships. There's even talk of building more stations like this one. "And the best part," Wells added, "is that it's all happening naturally. No forced agreements, no peace treaties signed under threat. Just people choosing to understand each other better." Through the network, they felt ripples of change spreading across both civilizations. Artists were creating works combining both human and coalition styles. Scientists were sharing discoveries that had been kept secret during the war. Families separated by the conflict were reuniting. "There will always be those who choose not to connect," Reed said, thinking of the millions who still viewed the network with suspicion. "And that's okay. That's part of what makes this work." First Light nodded. The builders understood that true peace isn't about everyone thinking the same way. It's about understanding each other even when we think differently. A group of children ran past the chamber, human and coalition young playing together, their laughter echoing through the station's corridors. Through the network, their joy rippled to everyone connected, a reminder of what they had gained. "So what do we do now?" Stone asked, watching the dying star through the window cast its endless sunset colors across the station. "We keep offering the choice," Wells said simply. "We keep showing people that understanding doesn't mean losing yourself. It means growing larger." Reed touched the master crystal one last time, feeling the ancient memories it held. The builders had faced their own wars, their own fears, their own choices. They hadn't solved all their problems, but they had created a way for people to understand each other better. As the star's light painted the chamber in shades of gold and red, the 4 friends stood together, connected but still themselves, watching as their civilizations took their first steps toward a future built not on weapons or wars, but on the simple, powerful choice to understand. The legendary weapon had fulfilled its prophecy, not with destruction, but with possibility. And that, they all agreed, was the greatest victory of all.